This is Chapter 3 of Following the Equator. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Following the Equator by Mark Twain, Chapter 3. Honolulu, Reminiscences of the Sandwich Islands, King Liholiho and his royal equipment, the taboo, the population of the island, a Kanaka diver, cholera at Honolulu, Honolulu past and present, the leper colony. It is more trouble to make a maxim than it is to do right. Pudd'nhead Wilson's New Calendar. On the seventh day out we saw a dim, vast bulk standing up out of the wastes of the Pacific, and knew that that spectral promontory was Diamond Head, a piece of this world which I had not seen before for 29 years. So we were nearing Honolulu, the capital city of the Sandwich Islands, those islands which to me were paradise, a paradise which I had been longing all those years to see again. Not any other thing in the world could have stirred me as the sight of that great rock did. In the night we anchored a mile from shore. Through my port I could see the twinkling lights of Honolulu and the dark bulk of the mountain range that stretched away right and left. I could not make out the beautiful Nuuanu Valley, but I knew where it lay, and remembered how it used to look in the old times. We used to ride up it on horseback in those days, we young people, and branch off and gather bones in a sandy region where one of the first Kamehameha's battles was fought. He was a remarkable man for a king, and he was also a remarkable man for a savage. He was a mere kinglet, and of little or no consequence at the time of Captain Cook's arrival in 1788, but about 4 years afterward he conceived the idea of enlarging his sphere of influence. That is a courteous modern phrase which means robbing your neighbor for your neighbor's benefit, and the great theater of its benevolences is Africa. Kamehameha went to war, and in the course of 10 years he whipped out all the other kings and made himself master of every one of the 9 or 10 islands that form the group. But he did more than that. He bought ships, freighted them with sandalwood and other native products, and sent them as far as South America and China. He sold to his savages the foreign stuffs and tools and utensils which came back in these ships, and started the march of civilization. It is doubtful if the match to this extraordinary thing is to be found in the history of any other savage. Savages are eager to learn from the white man any new way to kill each other, but it is not their habit to seize with avidity and apply with energy the larger and nobler ideas which he offers them. The details of Kamehameha's history show that he was always hospitably ready to examine the white man's ideas, and that he exercised a tidy discrimination in making his selections from the samples placed on view. A shrewder discrimination than was exhibited by his son and successor, Liholiho, I think. Liholiho could have qualified as a reformer, perhaps, but as a king he was a mistake. A mistake because he tried to be both king and reformer. This is mixing fire and gunpowder together. A king has no proper business with reforming. His best policy is to keep things as they are, and if he can't do that, he ought to try to make them worse than they are. This is not guesswork. I have thought over this matter a good deal, so that if I should ever have a chance to become a king, I would know how to conduct the business in the best way. When Liholiho succeeded his father, he found himself possessed of an equipment of royal tools and safeguards which a wiser king would have known how to husband and judiciously employ and make profitable. The entire country was under the one scepter, and his was that scepter. There was an established church, and he was the head of it. There was a standing army, and he was the head of that. An army of 114 privates under command of 27 generals and a field marshal. There was a proud and ancient hereditary nobility. There was still one other asset. This was the taboo, an agent endowed with a mysterious and stupendous power, an agent not found among the properties of any European monarch, a tool of inestimable value in the business. Liholiho was headmaster of the taboo. The taboo was the most ingenious and effective of all the inventions that has ever been devised for keeping a people's privileges satisfactorily restricted. It required the sexes to live in separate houses. It did not allow people to eat in either house. They must eat in another place. It did not allow a man's womenfolk to enter his house. It did not allow the sexes to eat together. The men must eat first, and the women must wait on them. Then the women could eat what was left, if anything was left, and wait on themselves. I mean, if anything of a coarse or unpalatable sort was left, the women could have it. But not the good things, the fine things, the choice things, such as pork, poultry, bananas, coconuts, the choicer varieties of fish, and so on. By the taboo, all these were sacred to the men. The women spent their lives longing for them and wondering what they might taste like, and they died without finding out. These rules, as you see, were quite simple and clear. It was easy to remember them, and useful, for the penalty for infringing any rule in the whole list was death. Those women easily learned to put up with shark and taro and dog for a diet when the other things were so expensive. It was death for anyone to walk upon tabooed ground, or defile a tabooed thing with his touch, or fail in due servility to a chief, or step upon the king's shadow. The nobles and the king and the priests were always suspending little rags here and there and yonder to give notice to the people that the decorated spot or thing was taboo, and death lurking near. The struggle for life was difficult and chancy in the islands in those days. Thus advantageously was the new king situated. Will it be believed that the first thing he did was to destroy his established church, root and branch? He did indeed do that. To state the case figuratively, he was a prosperous sailor who burnt his ship and took to a raft. This church was a horrid thing. It heavily oppressed the people. It kept them always trembling in the gloom of mysterious threatenings. It slaughtered them in sacrifice before its grotesque idols of wood and stone. It cowed them, it terrorized them, it made them slaves to its priests, and through the priests to the king. It was the best friend a king could have, and the most dependable. To a professional reformer who should annihilate so frightful and so devastating a power as this church, reverence and praise would be due. But to a king who should do it, could properly be due nothing but reproach, reproach softened by sorrow, sorrow for his unfitness for his position. He destroyed his established church, and his kingdom is a republic today in consequence of that act. When he destroyed the church and burned the idols he did a mighty thing for civilization and for his people's weal, but it was not business, it was unkingly, it was inartistic. It made trouble for his line. The American missionaries arrived while the burned idols were still smoking. They found the nation without a religion, and they repaired the defect. They offered their own religion, and it was gladly received. But it was no support to arbitrary kingship, and so the kingly power began to weaken from that day. 47 years later, when I was in the islands, Kamehameha V was trying to repair Liholiho's blunder, and not succeeding. He had set up an established church and made himself the head of it. But it was only a pinchbeck thing, an imitation, a bauble, an empty show. It had no power, no value for a king. It could not harry or burn or slay. It in no way resembled the admirable machine which Liholiho destroyed. It was an established church without an establishment. All the people were dissenters. Long before that, the kingship had itself become but a name, a show. At an early day the missionaries had turned it into something very much like a republic, and here lately the business whites have turned it into something exactly like it. In Captain Cook's time, 1778, the native population of the islands was estimated at 400,000. In 1836 at something short of 200,000. In 1866 at 50,000. It is today, per census, 25,000. All intelligent people praise Kamehameha I and Liholiho for conferring upon their people the great boon of civilization. I would do it myself, but my intelligence is out of repair now from overwork. When I was in the islands nearly a generation ago, I was acquainted with a young American couple who had among their belongings an attractive little son of the age of 7, attractive, but not practicably companionable with me, because